Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm Peter Lavelle. On this edition of our podcast, I'm joined by George Szamuely, and we're going to talk about an article that Glenn Greenwald wrote recently. Why are Democrats praying for a speedy recovery of a fascist dictator? And Mr. Greenwald is a man on the left. Okay, I'm not. Okay, and many of the policy preferences he have, I do not necessarily agree with. Sometimes emphatically do not agree with. But Glenn has been a real bright star over the last 4 years or so, condemning the RussiaGate hoax. Okay, and he's done it quite effectively. He is a lawyer, and he uses his lawyer knowledge, his judicial knowledge, to destroy this narrative that has been perpetuated on us for the last 3.5 years. And I want to make it clear, he was against the war in Iraq as well. Here's a consistency to this person here. But George, he points out, and I'm sure you noticed it as well, how when Trump went into Walter Reed with COVID, all of a sudden, he's no longer portrayed as this genocidal fascist, as Glenn Greenwald points out, and thoughts and prayers, the usual thing that people say. And he draws this conclusion, which I actually agree with, is that their whole attitude towards Trump is just, you must hate him and nothing else. There's nothing behind it. There's nothing behind it at all. How can you have good wishes towards someone that you think is a genocidal fascist, someone that you think is akin to Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini and Pol Pot and all the rest of them? How can they go from one to the next? Because, well, he's out of the hospital. I guess their narrative is back in gear. They paused it for the weekend. What do you think about that?
Well, what Greenwald is doing is demonstrating the hypocrisy and dishonesty of the Democratic Party. He points out that they've been accusing him of being Hitler, a fascist, a Nazi, a Mussolini, all of these years. And now they profess to be terribly concerned about his well-being. Now, what does one draw from that conclusion? Well, either that they were insincere then, that when they accused him of being a Hitler and a Nazi and so on, or they're being insincere now. And of course, the conclusion has to be that they were insincere then and they're insincere now. They were insincere then because they thought this is a really cute way of destroying Trump by accusing him of all these things, because Hitler, Nazi, fascist, that's about as far as you can go. I mean, you've reached the limit there. They tried that. And now, of course, they're being insincere now because they're running against COVID. And so they have to then pretend that if you're diagnosed with COVID, then of course it's a death sentence. And who is to blame for COVID? But none other than Trump himself. So they were being insincere then, and they're being insincere now. So at least the Democrats are being consistent in their deceitfulness.
And a very interesting thing too that Greenwald brings up. He doesn't address it directly because he uses a quote from CNN, and he shows the silliness and insincerity of leading Democrats, but he doesn't really go into the weeds. I would like to go into the weeds with you on this one here. In March of this year, this is Greenwald writing. In March of last year, as CNN puts it. Quote, two powerful House Democrats invoked Adolf Hitler's actions in Germany and the treatment of the Jews during World War I and in the 1920s to warn against the direction the U.S. is moving in, both saying Donald Trump's presidency presents an unprecedented threat to democracy. George, you want to have a swing at just like all of the fallacies mentioned in that one sentence?
Yes. Strange. World War I and the 1920s and Adolf Hitler. Yeah. Most people had hitherto assumed that Hitler came to power in January 1933. I guess the Democrats know a little better. They can predate that to the World War I and the 1920s. They may be getting confused by different cliches, because there are those who are talking about Weimar and that somehow this was the terrible days of Weimar, and that gave birth to the these sort of demagogues a la Donald Trump. So they may be getting confused with that particular cliche. And so, they've got their wires crossed somehow.
The interesting thing is that CNN is reporting on this, and it's not reflecting on the fact that it is historically incorrect. Okay, what they do is just perpetuate it as if they think it's true. Okay, now one of the things, and I want to make it very clear, and I think we need to make a separate podcast on this. I think you would agree with me. I very, very rarely use the word fascist in contemporary parlance for politics, because I think you have to really know what you're talking about to use that term here. And for those that make the claim that Trump is like Hitler, well, let's look at Hitler's Germany. Okay, there was no freedom of the press. Well, almost all of the press is against Trump. It exists, okay? As a matter of fact, they make fortunes off of the fact that Donald Trump is in the White House. One of the first things the Nazis did was destroy trade unions. Trade unions are not being destroyed under Donald Trump at all, okay? The due process of law has not been interrupted. As a matter of fact, I would make the claim that the Democrats are blocking the due process of law. We can look at the case of General Flynn. You could go on and on and on. There were no opposition political parties. Well, the opposition party are the Democrats, and they pummel on Trump 24/7, except 24 hours or 48 hours when he had COVID. And initially, I believe he's still recovering from it. So, I mean, when people make this comparison, they have no idea what they're talking about, and this comparison is very dangerous.
Well, of course, it's very dangerous, because once you've accused someone of being Hitler, you've pretty well given a carte blanche and a loaded gun to those out on the street who rightly conclude, well, if this guy is Hitler, I better do something to stop him. I better do something to stop his supporters, because any minute now we're going to have a Holocaust or a world war or whatever. So this sort of thing is extremely dangerous, because it whips up hatred and then violence among those who perhaps are not quite as cynical in their use of language as the Democratic leaders are. So this goes back to the kind of the Dostoevsky's problem in the Brothers Karamazov, the famous Smerdikov problem. Ivan Karamazov, the kind of the demonic figure in the Brothers Karamazov, of course, had all these interesting intellectual exercises, but the person who was listening to them, Smerdikov, he wasn't on Ivan's intellectual level. He took it literally. He thought, murder is justifiable. He took it literally, and that's where you get into this problem where people say, well, he's a Nazi, he's a Hitler, or as in other Democratic Party trope, which is he's a traitor, he's an agent of Putin's. That people are going to take it seriously. Oh, wow, this guy is Hitler. Wow, this guy is a traitor. I better do something about it, because otherwise, if I don't, we've got a Holocaust on our hands.
And then if someone pushes against their narrative, then we also fall into that category, and that we have to be a victim of cancel culture, of shaming, of all forms of bullying. If you disagree, in Nazi Germany, you could not disagree. All right. In the Western world, we still can disagree. There are consequences for it, but you can still do that. Again, the comparison isn't there whatsoever. This trope is a substitute for thinking. It's a substitute for having a substantive debate. I mean, we heard this during the first debate when we heard the bounties in Afghanistan. I mean, it's been debunked. Russiagate has been debunked, but it continues. It goes on and on. It has a life of its own right now. It's not about the bounties. It's not about alleged collusion. It's a frame of mind, is what it is. It's a point of reference in our politics right now. It has no substance. Okay, it just has form.
And that's why, if you look at the Twitter account of various Democratic candidates for Congress or for the Senate, they are all cheerfully tweet and retweet every day. Well, it's now been 100 days since we first heard about the Russian bounties, and Donald Trump still hasn't said anything about that. Vote for me, and let's bring an end to Putin's dictatorship of the United States. So the Democrats think that this is a very cute little exercise of pretending that Putin is running the United States through Trump. It's a completely idiotic, no evidence whatsoever, but the Democrats are using this for their own cynical political ends. And it is really despicable because, you can have disagreements with people, but you don't go there. You don't call people traitors. You don't call people agents of a foreign power. But the Democrats have gone over that, and they crossed that line, just as they cross a line by saying Trump is Hitler. No evidence for that whatsoever. Again, you listed all the various ways in which he's not like the Hitler. You also say he's adhered to every single court decision. Every court decision that's gone against him, he has accepted. When has he ever challenged any court decision? And so there's no basis for it. But hey, this is politics. Let's we want to win back power. Let's just say anything, and then surprise, surprise, there's violence on the street because people have got themselves whipped up into a fervor. Hey, there's a traitor about. There's a traitor occupying the White House. There's a Hitler occupying the White House. This is dangerous, reckless, and the Democrats are really, they've become a really disgusting political party. I don't think there's any political party anywhere in the Western world that can compare with the Democrats in disgustingness.
The thing for me is they don't take any responsibility for their words at all. And they refuse when they're challenged, when people start making connections. My favorite one here, it's so blatant, it's painful when you see people deny it, is that, a social gathering, large groups, it should be verboten, everything should be locked down, except for Black Lives Matter protests. That is just so anti-science. It just so, It's like somebody hitting you with a bat over the head. It's like, no, that's not. That's politics. That's politicking. And don't tell me I am wrong. I had that happen to me on Crosstalk, and I just said, this Democratic woman, she really blew up at me, and I just kept saying, here on Skype, it doesn't work very well, but I kept saying, no, it's political. No, it's political. And there's flat out denial, the denial of reality, of common sense. And this is what we have right now. And that's what's so jarring for me. And people that, conservative people that are against the, politically against the Democrats and these liberals, they get our blood pressure up. When you want to start denying obvious empirical truth and at the same time you want power over me, okay? That's a scary thought.
Right. No, that's exactly right. The very same people who are indignant about demonstrations against lockdowns are suddenly celebrating Black Lives Matter. Kamala Harris, who was on some show and says, these protests are not going to stop. They're not going to stop. They're just going to continue. And it's a good thing that they'll continue. They shouldn't stop. Hey, what about the health hazard, COVID? I thought a viral infection and all that. No. They just let's just hope that they continue. Why? Because the Democrats think that this plays to their advantage. This is their shock troops to get them to power. It is again the hypocrisy is so cynical.
A claim, I saw it on CNN, is that looting isn't violence, okay? Looting, ergo, is a form of legitimate protest. Well, when Minneapolis was on fire, people like myself was thinking, well, what about all those small businesses, people that put their entire life pulling themselves up on, a lot of them were immigrants, where in Pakistan, they burn your house down, and now they do it here. Okay. I'm just
that's right.
Example there.
But, and the notion that somehow, it doesn't really matter because they're insured and they'll get their insurance money. Not necessarily. These are small businesses. They may not have any insurance, or they may not be covered against looting. business burned down. That's business is burned down. It's not, it's not going to be that easy. Oh, well, I'll start all over again the day after tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. So that whole idea, oh, well, that's not really violence. It's laughable. I mean, and again, a really despicable argument.
Well, we'll end on this here, is that this rank hypocrisy, let them protest, let them take to the streets. They're misdiagnosing what's going on here, because people see that the system has failed them, and the origins of the current system are the Democratic Party. Okay, and they have no agenda to fix these things. It will be a Pyrrhic victory if they win. And I mean, a grand slam across the board. It will be a Pyrrhic victory because they have no answers for the problem that for the problems that they have incited people to take illegal, and I would say immoral acts. Okay, they will rue the day. Okay, they will rue the day. Okay, George, that's all the time we have for this segment here. I want to thank George here. And if you like this kind of stuff, like, share, and subscribe, and the Gaggle will have a whole lot more for you. Thanks.